The imperial archives of the Sylvani Empire smelled like old paper and forgotten time, which was exactly why Dr. Nathan Cross loved it. He'd been cataloging dead languages for 6 months in this massive underground repository, alone except for floating archival drones that hummed softly as they retrieved storage containers. It was the most peaceful job he'd ever had, which was saying something for a man who'd spent his career studying civilizations that no longer existed. The Sylvani themselves were beautiful in that untouchable way ancient civilizations often were. Their silver skin caught light like water. Their long, pointed ears expressed emotion through subtle positioning, and their culture stretched back thousands of years while humanity was still figuring out agriculture. Nathan was grateful they'd let him into their archives at all, even if it was mostly because nobody else wanted the job of translating texts so old they'd been relegated to deep storage. He was working on a particularly lovely poem, something about starlight and memory, when his comm device chimed with unusual urgency. Ambassador Lee's face appeared, looking stressed. "Nathan, I need you at the Grand Court in 1 hour. The Queen wants to meet you." Nathan looked down at his dust-covered work clothes and the translation tablet covered in his terrible handwriting. The Queen? Why would Queen Thessara want to meet a cataloger? No idea, but when the sovereign of a 4,000-year-old empire requests your presence, you show up. Please try to look presentable. An hour later, Nathan stood in the Grand Court feeling spectacularly unprepared. The chamber was vast and crystalline, filled with Sylvani nobility whose silver skin gleamed with what he suspected was disapproval. Queen Thessara sat elevated on a throne of living crystal that pulsed with soft blue light. Her ears were swept back in perfect regal position, her skin reflecting the room's light with mirror-like precision. She was magnificent and terrifying. Ambassador Lee introduced him with credentials that sounded much more impressive than Guy, who translates dead languages in a basement. Nathan tried to remember the proper greeting protocol, bowing at what he hoped was the correct angle. Then, nervous and wanting to show respect for Sylvani culture, he offered a traditional greeting, words from the beautiful poem he'd been translating that morning. Silmer Ithani Vestal, Nevarim Kore. The court went absolutely, utterly silent. Not the polite quiet of formal ceremony, but the shocked silence of collective disbelief. Queen Thessara's skin went completely flat gray, losing all reflectivity like a mirror suddenly dark. Her ears flattened against her skull. A noble somewhere behind Nathan made a sound between a gasp and a choke. Nathan realized he'd made a terrible mistake. He just had absolutely no idea what it was. The guest quarters were luxurious and politely inescapable. Nathan had been invited to stay there for 2 days while the court decided what to do with him. Nobody would explain what he'd done wrong, only that Queen Thessara would speak with him when she was ready. Nathan spent the time frantically reviewing everything he knew about Sylvani cultural taboos, trying to figure out what phrase from a dusty old poem could have caused such a reaction. When Queen Thessara finally arrived, she came alone, no guards, no attendants, no witnesses. That was either very good or catastrophically bad. Her skin was calm silver again, but her ears trembled slightly, betraying emotion her face didn't show. "Repeat what you said in the throne room," she commanded quietly. Nathan pulled up his translation tablet with shaking hands and carefully pronounced the greeting again. Silmer Ethani Vestal, Nevarim Korai. Thessara's skin rippled with colors Nathan had never seen on any Sylvani, deep blues and purples and flashes of gold. Her ears flicked through positions too quickly to read. When she finally spoke, her voice was strained. "Do you understand what language you just spoke? I assumed it was an old form of Sylvani, from the poems I've been translating in the archives." "Old Sylvani," Thessara repeated, the words sounding almost like prayer. "The sacred language of our founding era. Lost over 3,000 years ago during the Great Forgetting when fire destroyed our earliest records. The language our greatest poems, our founding philosophies, our cultural soul was written in." She stepped closer, her silver eyes intense. "The language that supposedly no living being in this empire can speak." Nathan's stomach dropped. "I didn't know. There are hundreds of texts in the archives. I've been cataloging them for months." "Nobody said they were." "Because nobody knew what they were," Thessara interrupted. "The script changed over millennia. The texts were filed as unknown dialects, low priority. They've been sitting forgotten in storage for centuries. Her skin flashed with something that looked like bitter amusement. An alien linguist accomplishes in 6 months what our own scholars failed to do in 3,000 years. Your Majesty, I apologize if I've. You spoke the tongue of my ancestors in my own court, Thesara said, her voice carrying complex emotion Nathan couldn't parse. You made me hear the language I thought I would die without knowing, the loss that has haunted my people for millennia. She paused, then asked something that sounded dangerous. Can you teach me? Nathan stared at her. You want to learn Old Silveni? From me. In secret, Thesara said firmly. No one can know, not yet, can you do this? Nathan thought about all the reasons. This was politically complicated and personally risky. Then he thought about the beautiful poems collecting dust in the archives, about a queen asking to learn the language of her own ancestors, about knowledge that deserved to be alive instead of buried. Yes, he said, I can teach you. They met in the deepest levels of the archives, where even the drones rarely ventured. Nathan would arrive first, preparing texts and translations. Thesara would slip in through private passages, dressed simply, her royal bearing softened by genuine excitement. And there, surrounded by forgotten knowledge, something remarkable unfolded. Thesara wasn't learning Old Silveni from Nathan. She already knew it. She'd known it for years. I found fragments when I was a young princess, she admitted during their third session, her skin cycling through shades of blue that Nathan had learned meant vulnerability. Hidden in my family's private archives, I taught myself in secret, piecing together grammar from context, pronunciation from ancient phonetic guides. But I could never speak it, never even whisper it aloud for fear someone would hear. Why? Nathan asked, though he was starting to understand. Because the great forgetting is sacred tragedy to my people, Thesara explained, running her fingers over an ancient text. Our royal authority rests partly on the idea that we lead forward because the past is gone. That we're unburdened by ancient dogma because those texts were destroyed. If I revealed I'd recovered Old Silveni, it would raise questions no one wants answered. What else did the royal family hide? What knowledge was deliberately forgot rather than accidentally lost? Why did the great forgetting really happen? They sat in silence for a moment, surrounded by answers to questions that might destabilize an empire. Then Thesara smiled, genuinely smiled, her ears high and relaxed, and said in Old Silveni, "But you gave me someone to speak with. For the first time in my life, I can hear these words aloud." They translated poetry together, recovered prayers thought lost forever, pieced together philosophical texts that challenged current Silveni orthodoxy about honor, governance, and the relationship between past and future. Thesara's skin came alive during these sessions in ways Nathan had never seen in public, joy making her shimmer like starlight, sorrow dimming her to pewter gray, wonder flashing through her in gold. Speaking this language, she told him one evening, her voice soft in Old Silveni, feels like finding a part of myself I didn't know was missing, like coming home to a place I've never been. Nathan understood. He'd felt something similar when he first deciphered the poetry, a sense of touching something profound and precious that had almost been lost. Their secret sessions became the center of both their worlds, a space where a human scholar and an alien queen could exist simply as two people who loved language and refused to let beautiful things die. But secrets in royal courts never stay buried. When High Counselor Vess discovered them together, speaking in a musical tongue she didn't recognize, everything threatened to unravel. The Grand Council chamber felt like a trial even though Nathan hadn't technically been charged with anything. Yet, noble houses filled the space, their silver skin reflecting anxiety and anger. Rumors had spread like wildfire. The human corrupted the queen with alien mysticism. He taught her forbidden arts. She violated sacred traditions by learning what should stay forgotten. The conservative faction wanted Nathan expelled. Some wanted worse. Ambassador Lee sat in the human delegation section, looking like she might be sick. Nathan stood in the center of the chamber, very aware that he was one human facing an empire's worth of judgment. Queen Thesara sat on her throne, her skin locked in formal silver, her ears in rigid neutral position. She looked untouchable again, the way she had when he first saw her. He wondered if he'd imagined those moments in the archives when she'd been just Thesara, a woman discovering her own heritage. High Counselor Vess presented the accusations formally. The human scholar overstepped his authority. He accessed restricted materials. He taught the queen unknown practices that could be dangerous. Each charge was technically true and completely missed the point. Then Thessara stood. The chamber fell silent. When she spoke, it wasn't in modern Sylvani. It was in old Sylvani. The language flowed from her with perfect fluency, her voice carrying words that hadn't been heard in public for 3 millennia. She recited the founding poem of the Sylvani people, the text Nathan had been translating that first day, the one everyone believed lost. Each line landed like thunder. Silmer ethani vesthal, nevarim kore, by starlight and memory we are bound. Thessali navim, korthan s, in darkness we found light, in silence we found voice. Valnim ethes korai, silmereth nav, we who were scattered became one, we who were silent spoke truth. Nobles wept openly. Scholars clutched their recording devices with shaking hands. The chamber itself seemed to hold its breath. Thessara continued in modern Sylvani, her voice strong. The great forgetting was not complete. Fragments of our ancestral language survived in our own archives, overlooked and dismissed because we stopped looking for them. A human scholar, with no agenda beyond curiosity, found what we failed to see for 3,000 years. Her skin flashed with defiant gold. And I, your queen, have been teaching myself this language for years, unable to speak it because the political cost seemed too high. She looked directly at the conservative faction. You call this forbidden knowledge? I call it our birthright. You claim Dr. Cross corrupted me. He gave me the courage to speak what I already knew. Our ancestors' wisdom wasn't destroyed. We abandoned it. We told ourselves comfortable lies about tragic loss rather than facing the truth. We forgot because we chose to forget. The chamber erupted. Some nobles rose in fury. Others collapsed in shock. The scholarly houses began shouting questions. Through it all, Thessara stood firm, her skin cycling through determination's deep blue. Old Sylvani will be recovered and taught, she declared. The archives will open to scholars of all species. Our past will no longer be locked away because we fear what it might tell us about our present. Nathan watched this elegant alien woman risk everything: political stability, royal authority, personal safety, to speak truth instead of maintaining comfortable lies. When their eyes met across the chaos, she nodded slightly. They'd known this moment might come. She was choosing it anyway. The weeks that followed were tumultuous. Conservative houses raged about tradition violated. Progressive factions celebrated cultural renaissance. Scholars from across the coalition requested access to the archives. And through it all, Thessara and Nathan continued their work, now in the open, teaching old Sylvani to anyone willing to learn. The night before Nathan was scheduled to return to Earth, Thessara found him in the archives one last time. She handed him a scroll of traditional Sylvani paper, covered in the flowing script of old Sylvani. The first new poem composed in this language in 3,000 years, she said softly. I wrote it for you, for us, for what we built together. Nathan read it slowly, translating. A bridge between worlds built from words thought lost. Understanding speaks louder than empires. In finding our past, we found each other. In sharing our knowledge, we freed ourselves. His throat tightened. It's beautiful. Take it to Earth, Thessara said. Let it be the first text in humanity's study of old Sylvani.